I'm Kasem. Well, now on AT40, we're up to our story of the lead guitarist who broke the law and then tried to escape on a gasoline-powered skateboard. He's Craig Chaquico, lead guitarist of the Jefferson Starship. And Craig's main hobby is skateboarding. That's what he spends most of his spare time doing around his hometown of San Francisco. Now, not long ago, a skateboard manufacturer sent Craig one of their new models to try out, a gasoline-powered skateboard. Well, Craig cranked it up, hopped on, and headed for Golden Gate Park. But there's a San Francisco ordinance prohibiting motorized skateboards. So when a police car spotted him, they put on their red lights. And when Craig saw that he was being chased by police, he zoomed up a driveway to the sidewalk and maneuvered his way through surprised pedestrians. Since the police car couldn't follow him, he escaped. But Craig didn't learn his lesson. 2 days later, he was on his gasoline-powered skateboard again, taking in the beauty of Golden Gate Park. And as he putt-putted along, he suddenly heard hoofbeats behind him. And over his shoulder, he saw a mounted policeman closing fast. And once more, Craig tried to get away by pouring on the gas. But his skateboard had only a quarter-horsepower motor, and that cop was riding one whole horse. The chase was over in a gallop and a half. But Craig's luck held out. Instead of a ticket, the officer gave him a stern lecture and let him go. This week, the Jefferson Starship skateboard riding lead guitarist is also the co-writer of the song at number 29 in our countdown. Here's the Jefferson Starship with Find Your Way Back.
No, it's been a long, long road. American Top 40.
I'm Kasem. Now we're up to the hit song by the famous rock band who looked like they had it a few years ago when almost half the band quit. 3 out of 7 members of the Jefferson Starship gave notice. There was drummer John Barbetta, and even more crucially, the group's 2 lead singers, Marty Balin and Grace Slick. They all left the band. They didn't like the new hard rock direction the band wanted to move into, and the 3 of them walked away. Well, everyone thought the Starship was grounded for good. But a friend of the band recommended a new singer, the man who sang on this smash. In 1976, that song hit number 3, Fooled Around and Fell in Love. The lead singer from that band, the Alvin Bishop Band, was Mickey Thomas. Now, when the half-deserted Jefferson Starship heard some tapes of Mickey singing, they were knocked out, and they offered him the job. Then it was Mickey who was knocked out. He says, I wasn't a fan of Jefferson Airplane or Starship. I'd grown up in Georgia, listened to soul music. I thought me singing with the Starship? I really couldn't imagine it ever coming together. End of quote. Well, Mickey Thomas met the Jefferson Starship at a rehearsal, heard some new material, liked it, and gave it his best shot. Very quickly, things did come together. In late 1979, the Starship, with Mickey Thomas as lead singer, hit with Jane. Since then, they've had 4 more top 40 hits with 33-year-old Mickey Thomas singing the lead. And by the way, in 1982, Grace Slick beamed back aboard the Starship. The band's latest is at number 28 this week on American Top 40, the Jefferson Starship, with Mickey singing lead on No Way Out.
American Top 40.
We're counting down the biggest hits of the year gone by, and here's the band who needed 3 different names, a total of 19 members, and 18 years on the chart before they got a number 1 song. They began in the 1960s as the Jefferson Airplane, continued in the 1970s as the Jefferson Starship, and in 1985, the latest incarnation of this supergroup from San Francisco called themselves just the Starship. And as just the Starship, they finally hit number 1. That song is the 14th biggest song of the year, the Starship, and We Built This City.
We built this city on rock and roll. Say you don't know me. American Top 40.
The numbers get smaller as the hits get bigger. Now, the story of how an underage guitarist sneaked into show business. He's the Starship's star guitarist, Craig Chaquico. Craig told us that when he was growing up in Sacramento, California, the first real professional band he played with was a local group called Steel Wind. Craig was only 15 and under the legal working age. The other musicians were much older. So in order to pass for an adult and be able to play in the adult nightclubs where the band was booked, Craig took to wearing a phony mustache. Now, for a long time, the disguise worked. With his natural long hair and fake mustache, he looked older. No one questioned him, not even the night that he was coolly having a drink during intermission and suddenly noticed his mustache and his glass floating among the ice cubes. He said he ran into the bathroom and glued it back on. Close call. But the next time that happened, there was no place to run. It was during a set and he was on stage. The lights became unusually hot, and the glue that held the phony mustache on his upper lip started to melt. Craig says the glue was invisible under regular lights, but when they turned this black light on, the glue fluoresced bright green. People could see the stuff sliding down my face along with my mustache. End of quote. And that was the end of that job for underage 15-year-old Craig Chaquico. Now that he can grow a mustache more than 15 years later, Craig keeps a clean upper lip. Here he is at number 2 with the Starship, last week's number 1 song, Sarah.
American Top 40.
Now, the story of the guy who was all wet when he asked his girlfriend to marry him. He's the star guitarist of the Starship, Craig Chaquico. You see, some weeks ago, Craig decided it was time to propose marriage to his girlfriend, model Kim Wittenmeyer. They were vacationing in Hawaii and had plans to go scuba diving. But unknown to Kim, Craig had cooked up a scheme with the scuba instructor. As part of a game that diving students play, the instructor went out ahead of him to hide something at the bottom of the ocean floor for Kim and Craig to find. What he hid was a ship's bell. That's a brass bell about 6 or 8 inches in diameter. Well, Craig and Kim put on their wetsuits, strapped on the tanks and breathing apparatus, and went into the water to look for their prize. And the instructor guided them into the right spot, where Kim suddenly spotted something shiny and dug up that ship's bell. And by the sunlight filtering down through 40 feet of crystal blue Pacific Ocean, she read the words that Craig had engraved in the brass. "Will you marry me?" Well, Kim couldn't say much underwater, but as soon as they popped back up to the surface, she said yes. So, Craig Chaquico and Kim Wittenmeyer will be getting married at the end of this month on dry land. And on display next to the wedding cake will be that ship's bell with the engraved proposal. Well, here's that scuba diving groom now who's playing lead guitar for the Starship at number 28. Tomorrow doesn't matter tonight.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. Casey's Top 40 originates in Hollywood. Now, here's the band Starship, whose guitar player Craig Chaquico recently helped lead a rock and roll fantasy camp in San Francisco. After spending several days counseling would-be rockers on the fine art of performing, posing for pictures and signing autographs, Craig's now back to business as usual. This week, Craig Chaquico and Starship move up 5 notches to 25 in our survey with It's Not Enough.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem, counting down the most popular songs in the USA. Now we're up to a band with roots that stretch all the way back to 1965. Today, 24 years later, not a single member of that original band is left. In the rock era, there's hardly a major group we know of that's gone through as many changes as this one. It was born in San Francisco in 1965 as the Jefferson Airplane with lead singer Signe Anderson. By the time the Airplane hit the charts with Somebody to Love and White Rabbit in 1967, its lineup had already changed, settling into Grace Slick and Marty Balin on vocals, Paul Kantner and Jorma Kaukonen on guitar, Jack Cassidy on bass, and Spencer Dryden on drums. That lineup stayed together for 3 years before the membership started shifting around again. In the early 1970s, the Jefferson Airplane splintered into several groups and then reformed as the Jefferson Starship. That group had a string of 9 top 40 hits, including Miracles in 1975 and Count on Me in 78. Then, in 1985, the group changed names again, dropping the word Jefferson, becoming simply Starship. With the return of Grace Slick and the addition of singer Mickey Thomas, they had a string of hits, including their first number one, We Built This City, and Sarah. These days, a new Starship is on the charts, but without a single member left from its early days. The current Starship lineup is Mickey Thomas on vocals, Craig Chaquico on guitar, Mark Morgan on keyboards, Brett Bloomfield on bass, and Donnie Baldwin on drums.
Casey's Top 40.
Casey's Top 40 originates in Hollywood. Now we're up to the story of Starship's Craig Chaquico and how his dreams of being a guitarist took a strange detour. You see, Craig told us that as a child, he was a big fan of rock guitar heroes like Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton. Listening to them made him dream of a career in rock and roll. Craig's parents were also musically inclined, and they were also thinking of a career in music for their son, but not necessarily in rock and roll. Craig says that one day when he was 8, they came to him and asked him if he'd like to take music lessons. Craig said yeah. So Craig's parents asked him if he'd like to learn to play the accordion. Craig was so happy to be able to learn about music that he said sure. Then he asked, "What's an accordion?" By the time Craig found out that an accordion is a keyboard instrument that's been used in more polkas than rock songs, it was too late. He told us, quote, "I ended up taking 2 years of accordion lessons, which I hated because I wanted to play guitar the whole time." Craig kept complaining to his folks that he wanted to be a rocker, and finally they broke down and bought him his first guitar. After that, Craig was in heaven. He played his guitar every day. He told us that he lived real close to his school, and each afternoon, as soon as the bell rang, he'd hop on his bike and race home, run up to his bedroom, turn on the stereo, pick up his guitar, and start playing along with tracks by Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, and Jimi Hendrix. Craig says his parents had gambled. They thought that if he got a guitar, he'd soon lose interest and return to the accordion. That's a bet Mom and Dad lost, because Craig says he has never been without a guitar since. This week, Craig Chaquico, guitar player extraordinaire, joins his group Starship at number 30 with a song from their album, Love Among the Cannibals. Here's It's Not Enough.
Casey's biggest hits.
9 years ago this week, back in 1986, one of the biggest hits in the USA was by a band that celebrated its 20th anniversary with its biggest chart success ever. It's the group that began back in the mid-60s in San Francisco as the Jefferson Airplane. By the mid-70s, the airplane evolved into the Jefferson Starship. And by the mid-80s, the Jefferson Starship had dropped the first half of its name and became a very streamlined Starship. And it was as the Starship that this long-lived group had its greatest chart success, hitting big with We Built This City, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now, and the song that was one of the biggest hits in the USA 9 years ago this week. Here's the Starship with Sarah.
American Top 20.
We're counting down to the number 1 song in the USA. Now here's the song that was number 1 on the pop chart 13 years ago this week, back in 1985. It's by a San Francisco group that since forming in 1965 has had more than 25 different band members and 3 name changes. Here's the band formerly known as Jefferson Airplane and Jefferson Starship, Starship with We Built This City.
Don't you remember?
It's your favorite radio station in your favorite radio city, the city by the bay, the city that rocks, the city that never sleeps.
Marconi plays the mambo. Listen to the radio.